Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Get Pairing. This is episode 17. Yes, 17. Man, I
Yes.
do that every fucking time, dude. Where I lose the number as I go live and forget what number I'm on. But this is episode 17. We are going to be smoking the RoMa Craft Quinquagenario. Quinquagenario? I'm not sure which one it is. But either way, we'll be smoking it. Trying it out, pairing it with some different stuff than usual on one side. Uh, grab yourself a cigar, grab yourself a drink, and let's get pairing.
Cinquante.
Quinquagenario. That's what I keep calling it. At least
There's
in
got
my
to be a
head.
phonetic breakdown somewhere.
I think it's Quinquagenario.
Okay.
No, it wouldn't be Quinquagenario. Quinca.
Yeah.
Quinqua. Man, I can't pronounce this word. I've tried so many times. I was practicing it today, and I still don't feel like I can get it right. But this
Yeah,
is
dude.
the Quinquagenario from RoMa Craft, blended, of course, mostly by Skip Martin. The story behind this cigar is pretty interesting. We'll get into that in just a minute. But first, Dennis, you're back this week. Wait, I forgot to do the thing. I'm your host, Trip, broadcasting from the
Yeah, you
Casa de
are.
Monte Cristo studios. Here with my co-host, Dennis, broadcasting from the Perilous Purgatory porch in New Jersey.
That's right. My now temporary my office is out of order and biohazard lockdown, like not even joking biohazard lockdown. So until that's fixed, I'm gonna be out here. But it's good to be back, man.
The
And I
audio
hope
sounds good.
I
The
hope I
video
get to
looks
stay
good.
back, which will be really fantastic. And shout out to cigar surgeon John McTavish, a good friend of ours for last week, man. Awesome for him to jump in and always great to just hear him talk about, like I could listen to him talk about anything. He talk about bagels and it's amazing.
Yeah, he was great to have on. It was a
Yeah.
lot of fun. We missed you, of course, but glad you're back now. And if anybody's
Yeah, man.
filling in, it might as well be John, right?
Absolutely.
So,
You can be my stunt double any day.
we're smoking the Quinquagenario. I feel like I'm getting better at it from RoMa Craft to back. The story behind the cigar is that for Skip Martin's 50th birthday, and I think part of the reasoning I read was that within the factory there were a few 50th birthdays coming up in the next few years between him and Mike. But this was kind of his celebration cigar for his 50th birthday, but he didn't want to just do a cigar and be like, here's a cigar, it's my 50th birthday, yay. He wanted to do something a little more interesting, being Skip Martin. So he kind of took it as an opportunity to work with Ernesto Perez Carillo, the legendary blender from what used to be called La Alianza, and is now called Casa Carrillo Factory in Dominican Republic. Um, if you somehow aren't familiar with Ernesto Perez Carillo or his current brand, you will probably recognize La Gloria Cubana, which uh, he started the original La Gloria Cubana factory in uh, Little Havana in
Back in the olden days,
Miami.
man.
Yeah, back in the 80s, 90s. Um, might have even been before that. I don't know the history, but this is about Skip, and Skip wanted to work with kind of one of his mentors as he saw it. So they created this cigar together at Ernie's factory, um, and they're produced by Ernie, um, or by his factory rather, and kind of against Skip's normal blending style. This is more Dominican focused, as most of Ernesto's blends are. Um, and I started to mention it, but quinquagenario means somebody who's in their 50s. That's where the name comes from. I don't know if they're still doing it because, sometimes plans change, but the initial plan was to do a few of these over the 10-year period of Skip's 50s, uh, to kind of,
Which would be
I don't
cool.
know,
That's a kind of a fun concept.
try things out a little bit. I know he had mentioned that, but I haven't heard him mention it again. So I don't, sometimes people are doing things in the dark and don't tell us about them until they're about to come out. Sometimes plans change. All right, so the blend on this guy, the wrapper is Ecuadorian dark Sumatra, which I love dark Sumatra. I know it's not for everybody. Binder and filler are all Dominican. Price point is $15, and there were only 50,000 of these cigars produced. They're still out there. If you're interested in getting your hands on a few, you can still find them uh, in some places around the internet and some shops. But they're, it's a limited release, so they probably won't be coming back, at least not anytime soon. Dennis, what do you think of the cigar so far?
I love it. And
Wow.
I'm not just saying that because I haven't been able to smoke in oh god, I don't even know. It's been a while. I haven't had a cigar in a while. Um, but dude, and again, I think maybe my palate kind of reset, right? Because I wasn't smoking daily.
Hmm.
I took a good break, and yeah, man, it's it's very much not what you expect when you talk about RoMa Craft, the typical profiles of RoMa Craft.
Absolutely.
Um, generally, and for me, I tend to get a lot of uh, dare I say, I'm trying to box it with words, a little bit spicier, more intense, right? We can start there. A little spicier, more intense. With this, it's almost the exact opposite. It's not that it's not strong or intense in flavor, but it's so uniquely different in that it's almost like a sweet and sour, acidic maybe.
That's an interesting way to put it. So what I was
I
gonna
don't know if you
say,
get the same.
so to me, this has a lot of that like red and black pepper that I expect from most Roma Craft cigars. Not all of them. Not all of them are particularly spicy, but this one
Yep.
starts off with kind of a punch of spice. Um, and then to me, there's definitely more like cedar wood in the on the palate from this one. Um, and then kind of like you were saying, there's a little bit of like an almost fruity kind of sweetness that I can't quite put my finger on. And
Citrus, yuzu.
oh, there's definitely a little bit of citrus. I hadn't
Like
even
I'm
thought of
I'm
that. It's a
maybe
very
again.
it's a very layered cigar because like I have
Yeah.
all of these notes already just on my first like three draws on it. There's also that like typical to me Dominican minerality. It's got like that kind of salt and earth and I guess salt and earth is really what I mean by minerality in this case. Not metallic, but
Yeah. Well, you
but
you liken
kind of
it
like a
to
rock.
like licking a rock.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
when
a
you lick a
rock.
rock.
That's what I always think of, man. And that's
Yeah.
what this reminds me of. And then to me, there's just a little bit of floral on the palate in this one,
Well,
especially
this is
when I retrohale.
if you lick your lips after putting it on the cigar, you lick your lips after the fact, and it's got that floral quality to it,
Hmm.
and a lot of that minerality that you mentioned. The salt is definitely there, which is really
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, it's a very interesting cigar. I think it's going to pair really well. Um, I think it's I think it's very interesting how different it is from the rest of Roma Craft stuff. Roma Craft is really known for most of their big brash blends. Um, I didn't mean for that to be a triple letter thing, but they're bigger, kind of brasher cigars that are more in your face than this. This is still very in your face, but has a lot more nuance to it than I think most of their cigars do. Um, and with that,
It's
let's
not
get
as
into some.
zippy,
Yeah, it's not
right?
as
I think
zippy,
it's
right?
yeah.
And it doesn't you don't immediately get that like punch of a very strong cigar. This one's kind of a very full flavored medium body.
Yeah, man.
Um, and with that, let's get into some pairing. So, my first pairing is going to be from uh, Jefferson's whiskey. This is Jefferson's Ocean. I'm actually doing kind of a vertical here because I have two different versions of it,
Oh
so
boy.
I can put them side by side. Um, Jefferson's, of course, was founded pretty recently for a whiskey company in 1997 by a guy named Trey Zoller and his father, who is a bourbon historian by profession. Um, when they were coming up with a name, Zoller's whiskey didn't sound great, so uh,
No.
they just came up with a name that seemed like it would be associated with history and tradition. So they chose Jefferson's. to kind of indicate that it maybe is Thomas Jefferson's, but they claim that wasn't really their intention. They just wanted a name that seemed like it had history. Uh, take from that what you may. It seems to me like they were like it was maybe a little scammy at first, but they took off.
Which is fine.
Yeah, which is fine. Um, it took off for I don't know how many years, but I know as of 2021, Jefferson's was the best-selling whiskey in the U.S. over $70. Specifically, Jefferson's Ocean. Um, this brand has become huge for them because it has that little bit of gimmick, but with enough payoff that the gimmick is okay, right? Um, the whole deal with this bourbon is that it's aged 4 years in a rick house like normal bourbon. Then they load those barrels onto cargo ships for about 6 months. I haven't been able to find um, specific dates on when the ships are loaded and unloaded or anything like that. But they say that most of them are about 6 months. Um, what we know is that they have a couple different methods of putting the barrels on the ship. Sometimes they're inside a container. Sometimes they're in a perforated container. Sometimes they're in a container that doesn't even have sides, and they're just kind of plastic
Yeah.
wrapped to keep them from falling all over the place. Um, but either way, the theory is that being on the ocean, you get that extra movement that adds a little bit of extra agitation to the barrels, and they age a little bit differently. And as we talked about the last time I had Jefferson's Ocean on, um, there you definitely like it's unmistakable. You get a little bit of salt on the palate from this, um, and what has been theorized, which makes sense to me, is that essentially salt isn't the part the what's the word? Molecules of salt are too big to pass through a barrel.
Yeah.
When it's
Yep.
absorbed, the salt is filtered out before the water is. So water and moisture can make it inside the barrels and out of the barrels, but salt cannot. But you end up with these caked with salt barrels that
Yeah. You end up getting salt in
you
it
get you
inadvertently.
get salt inadvertently
Yeah.
when you empty the barrels. Um, this one is voyage 23. I have 23 and 24. I'll tell you about 24 in just a couple minutes, but 23 um 23 was interestingly uh I have the last uh voyage that didn't have a map where they just had like
Oh,
a words description, and I have the first
interesting.
voyage where they had the map that you can look at
The
where the
new
ship
map.
went.
Yeah.
Um So this one, Voyage 23, has no map, but what they say is that they were loaded onto a ship in Savannah, Georgia. Basically, the ship traveled through the Panama Canal to the Pacific Ocean, and then went to Tahiti. That's kind of all the detail that they give. They always talk a little bit about what storms they ran into, the ship that the barrels were on, and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting. Um, but I don't think it's particularly meaningful, so I didn't bother to
I
notate that.
and I suspect again, they're not we've talked about this a little bit at some point. They're not really dedicated ships just for moving this stuff. Likely there's other things on that
Oh,
ship,
absolutely. They're
other
cargo
containers
ships.
full of things. They're actual just regular cargo ships. And they do some whatever consignment deal to I'd imagine you need some other licensing to haul alcohol
Probably.
across international waters. But
Yeah, that is
it's
most likely.
interesting.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, to circle back on that, basically what they're doing is they're just taking up extra room that isn't used on some of these cargo ships. I don't think they're my guess is that they're not paying full freight cost. They're dealing with some company that does the logistics for these kinds of ships, and they say, "Hey, we have a slot on this ship that this ship is at 90% capacity for this whole journey. Um, toss a couple containers of whiskey on there, and
Yeah.
if the room is going to be there anyway, they're
Oh
probably
boy.
getting a deal from this logistics company. That's just
Well,
all speculation.
they probably keep a couple of berths free for, if they get stuck in a storm and someone dies or is sick, they can quarantine them out. Or if they're smuggling workers or other people from other countries, pirates maybe. And they're like, yeah, fuck it. This time we're gonna throw some whiskey in there.
Yeah.
We've got nothing on our calendar. Just need to fill a room.
Yeah, exactly.
Priceline style, if you will, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Priceline or skip lag style.
Which
But
it makes sense. It's cool.
this Jefferson's Ocean is all Jefferson's Ocean. Actually, I shouldn't say all because I did notice that they recently had a cask strength version that was released. It's
That was
45% ABV for
yeah,
pretty much all of it.
yeah, that's fairly new.
But I'm going to let you talk about your first pairing, which is a little different for us. So what you got?
Yeah, man. I so as I am figuring out some health stuff, I'm kind of switching to I mentioned not really smoking lately, and I've switched off of alcohol for a little bit until I can get some things sorted, which is cool because it's given me an opportunity to really take some time and think about non-alcoholic options, whether it's seltzers, beers, spirits. I haven't got into, but I think spirits will be at some point in the future. I would love to check those out.
I keep wanting to try them,
Um,
but the price turns me off. Like
it's hard. I
when I
think
know it
initial
didn't spend
investment.
8 years in a barrel, I have a hard time paying $50 for a bottle of whiskey. You know?
Yeah. It's hard. I think for science, at some point I'll be able to justify that price. Uh, but I wanted, not being able to drink, let's say, alcohol or beer. I wanted to get a feeling for like I want to feel that. I miss it. I miss beer. I haven't had beer in I don't know 2 weeks, whatever it is. I miss it. So I started exploring the options, and the first beer that I have tonight that's non-alcoholic is, and I bought this purely because it's Old Milwaukee, right? You think Old Milwaukee, you think shitty dive bar somewhere,
Oh yeah.
right? Like your grandpa sitting on the couch smoking, Winston Salem cigarettes and chugging one of these, watching, like Bikini Girls or something.
Mm-hmm. Smoking his
So,
Benson and Hedges.
or Benson and Hedges, another great
That's
one.
another
Yeah.
old man cigarette.
Chesterfields.
Yeah.
Was it Chesterfields? Yeah. So Old Milwaukee, man, made a non-alcoholic beer, and apparently they've been making non-alcoholic beer since the 90s.
Crazy.
Like 90s. I want to tell you, I got some cool numbers for you. Um, so Old Milwaukee, for those of you that don't know, they are a brand that's owned by Pabst officially. They've been owned by Pabst for quite a while, actually. Originally started in the 30s, and that time they were being made by Schlitz. The full name is oh god, I know it as Schlitz. You know it as Schlitz, but it's like Joseph Schlitz. It's hard to say. Joseph Schlitz and Company, right? Joseph Schlitz Brewing Company. So
Ah.
they've been around for a long time, but in the 90s, they started playing around with non-alcoholic beers and actually competed and placed several categories, or sorry, they placed several times in that category of non-alcoholic. So 1995 is when they officially released their non-alcoholic beer, which is weird because I haven't seen it on shelves.
Yeah, I didn't know
But then it
non-alcoholic beer had really been around that long.
so and this is the cool history about non-alcoholic beers. To us, this is kind of new because we've been so busy in the like same thing with cigars. What's new? We always talk about, hey, what's the new thing? What's the new Vitola? What's coming out? What's the new blend? Who's doing what, right? But these things have been around for just like tobacco and cigars have been around for so long. Non-alcoholic beers were not really called non-alcoholic beers. They were called low beers or small beers,
Or near beers,
and
yeah.
that was near beer is a big thing in the U.S. Outside the U.S., Germany, and Europe, they'd call like a small beer. Small beers would be 2 to 3%, or table beer is popular as well. And yeah, man. So 1995 they came out, and they won gold, silver, bronze. They placed in every category, or every position, if you will, throughout the years with this beer, which is crazy because I've never seen it in stores.
Yeah. Neither have I.
But
Um, sorry, go ahead.
that being said, I was going to show you what it looks like.
Looks like
It's
piss
not,
beer.
yeah, it looks like. I mean, listen, it's got the head on, and it's got. I wanted a glass experience, and I wanted a can experience, and between the two of us, I think the can is. It's that right. It's that muscle memory, that feeling of. It's got the smell. like I wouldn't pour a PBR in a glass. I don't think you would either.
No, probably not. The only way PBR is going in a glass for me is if it's like on tap or a tap handle keg
Yeah.
or something like that.
And that being said, I think it hits the spot if you want a beer, but again, you always have to remember when it comes to non-alcoholic beers, they will always taste different, slightly different. They're not always going to taste right like the classic intense heavy beers. I've had non-alcoholic stouts before. They're good, right? But you're drinking a slightly different product, and I'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah,
It's
what you're
fascinating.
drinking is really something that is completely different, inherently different in the way it's made, but you're trying to mimic something that's has a
Right.
different process. But yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to talk about.
How's Jefferson, man?
Oh man, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let me taste it again and get some notes because I lost all my
So
notes while you were talking.
this was Voyage 23 you mentioned, right?
Voyage 23 heading to
Yeah.
Tahiti.
I
Um,
just had a bottle of 23 a couple months ago.
I like this one because it's very light on the palate. It has that classic bourbon sweetness. You get that little hint of salt, um, and I think the salt kind of leads to a little bit of a citrus note, which is working really well with that citrus note you talked about in the cigar. Um,
I find that the 23 as compared to at least for me the 16 and the 17 is not as chewy,
hmm Yeah,
which
to
I
me, it's
like.
a little. It's kind of a little more mild. I think a little more rounded flavor. Tastes a little older, if you
Yeah.
will. How's the old Milwaukee doing? What's that like? How does it compare to real old Milwaukee?
It's so it's got a similar profile. It's just a much lighter version of the classic old Milwaukee lager. They make a lager, they make a light, and they also make the non-alcoholic under their brand. And it's it looks like beer. It holds up decently well. The problem is to me they all taste like malt syrup. It's the sweetness is there, and that makes sense because they're not really fermenting it out all the way.
Yeah, because you can't
Sometimes,
because it
not
turns into
always.
alcohol.
Yeah.
So they have to
And
use
I'll get
kind of
into the
a
processing.
concentrate, right?
There are a couple of different ways, which is really interesting. Then I'll get into that during the next pairing. I'll tell you some fun facts.
All right. Jared Grillett in the comments says NA Guinness is fairly decent. I
Yeah,
agree. I
not bad
think
at all.
I think NA Guinness is um, like one of the newcomers to non-alcoholic, but I was really impressed with it. Michael King says talking non-alcoholic pairings, he likes craft sodas, root beers, sarsaparilla, cream sodas, and stuff like that. I think you're
Yeah,
absolutely in the right zone. Like that's exactly where soda works for me. Um,
even Mountain Dew, which classically was
yeah,
was created to be a mixer for whiskey by itself. You can mix it with juice. You can mix it with other things. Not bad.
really? Hmm. I've never thought about that. But yeah, I think those like the root beer corner of the soda world is where I usually go to when I'm pairing sodas. And Jared Grillett says, "Wait, one is having Old Milwaukee NA, and the other one is having Jefferson's. I don't see how that's fair. Uh, life isn't fair, Jared. That's just how it is sometimes."
Yeah.
I mentioned before the show when in the green room that I was gonna go NA this week, but I didn't make it to the store today like I expected to, and I don't have any non-alcoholic beer on hand. Um, I usually keep a couple, at least one, but I haven't since I moved to this house, and it's been a few months. Anyway, let's keep going. Uh, we'll talk more about the beer in your next pairing. My next pairing, as I mentioned, is kind of a, a vertical. This is the Voyage 24 from Jefferson's Ocean. Um, now, Voyage 24, the mash bill is the same as far as I know. The alcohol content is the same. This one was loaded onto a cargo ship in Port Everglades, Florida, and made stops all over the Caribbean. It's crazy because the other one listed 3 stops, and this one looks like it went on multiple cruise ships or something. Uh, but I doubt that because cruise ships aren't designed to have pallets and pallets of alcohol barrels on board, but it kind of did that route. So it started in Florida, went all over the Caribbean, including the Dominican Republic, Panama, Costa Rica. I think it ended up in Mexico at one point. Throughout,
Interesting.
they note in their notes, because they always tell you a little bit about what the weather was like. They note that first it hit a storm on the way back, so it had rough seas. Uh, but they noted that the humidity was higher than average, and the temperature inside the containers, the average was 93.82 degrees Fahrenheit,
Bam.
and they reached a maximum of 124. Um, that's hot.
That's
That's
wild.
real
That
hot.
is hot.
And that, like, that causes expansion of those woods, expansion of the liquids inside. So you kind of get that. I think of it as the breathing effect, where the barrels are getting bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller.
Yeah.
And usually that happens over a period of years. Here, it's getting so hot that they swell up, and then they go back at night when it cools down a little bit. Um, so I'm interested to see how this one tastes different, because I haven't compared these side by side yet. I wanted to save it for the show. And the other thing, the way I got this bottle is for Easter. I had some family visit. This was immediately after we got home from the trade show. The next day, I had a bunch of family get into town. My uncle, my aunts, my cousins, and they all came into town and hung out with us for Easter weekend. My uncle had watched the show and heard me talk about Jefferson's Ocean and went and hunted down a bottle.
That's awesome.
And gifted it to me. So that I just thought that was really cool. It meant a lot to me that he would watch the show first of all, and that he listened to what we were saying. Uh, he didn't just watch it in the background. He understood. Um, and so I had a couple glasses of this with him, but I haven't compared them side by side until now. So I'm going to take a couple sips and see how this does up against the Quinquagenario. I'm trying out different pronunciations.
It's hard to say. This one I am gonna pour because I've
Oh,
had
I
it.
know that
I
one. That
like
one's
it.
from our one of our favorite non-alcoholic beer companies.
Definitely, I think one of the best out there. Athletic Brewing Company. This is their light copper. So this is like their Mexican lager. And so they kind of hit the market really hard, I think, with their branding, with they're really flashy. They have really good branding, good messaging. Started in 2017 in Connecticut.
I
I
believe
believe they're
that.
in
Yeah.
Milford now. They were in Stratford, Connecticut first, moved to Milford, and then expanded out to San Diego. And they expanded out like it is a massive facility. They are
Really?
producing a ton of stuff. That facility, let me check my notes, tell you how big it was. It was something 200, it's 200,000 barrel capacity, which is insane. I believe. Yeah. So, and then if you go on their website, there's a ton of stuff that's produced videos, full information on all the products that they make, all the beers they make. The messaging behind Athletic Brewing Company is effectively right. You want to drink beer, but you want to drink something healthy. We talk about this all the time, right? We want you to drink better, but we want you to drink less.
Yeah.
And they, I think, really embody that feeling of you still want to have a beer, but you also maybe want to be a little bit healthier in some ways, or maybe you can't consume alcohol like me right now. I can't consume alcohol. So it's exciting. And it's exciting because it smells like beer, it tastes like beer, it looks like beer. I think this is probably one of the best non-alcoholics on the market. If you are looking for just something that is beer, basically.
Yeah, and I think one of the really interesting things about Athletic is that they really push the boundaries of what a non-alcoholic beer can be. I mean, for decades, it's been a non-alcoholic beer is just mimicking a pilsner. It's just basically sweetened It's basically seltzer water sweetened with malt
Malt syrup,
extract or
yeah,
whatever it is.
and then hopped on top.
Yeah, and then hop just to kind of give that flavor. And they're doing like I had a peanut butter porter from them that was incredible. Peanut butter chocolate, actually, it was. Um, it was fantastic. They've been doing stuff like mango hazy IPAs, which aren't for
Yeah,
everybody, but it's the fact that you can get a lot more options for uh, non-alcoholic beer than you used to be able to, and they really push the limits. Um, I had a Goza from them a few years ago that was really good, uh, and they one of the other big benefits is that you can have them shipped to your house. Uh, so you can like they have a club where every
yeah.
month or every 2 months they'll do an experimental beer, and they'll send you a pack of experimental beer if you join this club and pay X amount per month. Um, and they'll just send you a case of everything they make from that experimental branch, which is really cool. And they just kind of, you know, do off the wall stuff.
It's really fun. They don't I mentioned process. So there's a couple of different ways to make non-alcoholic beer. Really, if we break it down, you can either make regular beer and then remove the alcohol. There are a couple of different ways you can remove the alcohol. You can do like a reverse osmosis membrane process where you kind of strip out, you leave the volatile compounds that make it taste like beer and taste nice and smell nice, and then you strip out the alcohol with a membrane, which is very expensive and not very common. You can also distill it and get the alcohol out that way, or which is more common, I think more accessible to a lot of people, especially smaller breweries, is um, you alter the fermentation process. So you watch it very carefully, and you now we see. I think I'm trying to think of who did it. It may be Athletic that had a special yeast strain that is only tolerant to about 0.5% alcohol.
Yeah.
So either you use a yeast strain that has that kind of a tolerance, or you cut your fermentation short. That's one part of it. The
You
other side
basically
of it is
underfeed the yeast, right?
you underfeed the yeast. So either you cut it short or you underfeed the yeast from the malt profile. So in your mashing,
I've done that on
you're
accident
only
in a homebrew before.
yeah, it happens. If you fuck it up, it happens where you're mashing, you don't get the right sugars or enough of the complex sugars, and you end up with something like it tastes like basically piss with a lot of alcohol in it. Like, old English or something, right? A malt liquor base, not really a
Hmm.
craft beer, if you will. So it's kind of cool. There are a lot of different ways to approach removing alcohol, but again, this has been done for a very long time. Certainly longer than we've all heard about non-alcoholic beers on the market.
Yeah. Uh, I want to highlight Jared's question, Jared Grillet. He says, I always thought of the ocean as a gimmick. Like, how can that possibly make a difference? Um, I think that's what everybody thinks at first. Um, it's not it's not like it doesn't taste like the ocean. There is a hint of salt in Jefferson's Ocean, which is I think kind of its signature. Because otherwise the barrels or the blends
Hmm.
that they release, the voyages, the additions of it, kind of vary in their flavor profile. Um, I'll talk about the differences here for just a minute, but I wanted to address the question. Um, it's kind of like, I mean, I was gonna say it's kind of like the Metallica thing, but it's not. Uh, that thing really is just vibrate, vibrate the barrels and see what happens. But it's more like
Different frequencies, yeah.
there have been a couple of bourbons, and I can't remember what brands they are. I think one of them was some Eagle or no, some Buffalo Trace uh, whiskey, but I don't remember which one. That most of their barrels come from the top of the rick house, right? And
Yeah.
that that causes less low temperatures for the during the aging over the years. Um, but the thing is, you can taste the difference. I think it's more about temperature and humidity than it is about the rocking of the
Movement.
ocean,
Yeah. Same.
um, because the movement can really only do so much. It's just sloshing around in there, and that I don't know. inch or two of headroom is only going to do so much, uh, especially since barrels usually laying on their side. Uh, that extra 10% or whatever of barrel contact isn't going to make a huge difference. But I think the temperature and the humidity is really what does it because um, you can taste the difference in many whiskeys that are in cooler climates. You can taste the difference between a Kentucky whiskey and a I don't know Indiana whiskey. That is
And yeah, and I was going to say to
go
your
ahead.
point earlier, the pores of the wood, the expansion and contraction with temperature change and different wood fibers also has an effect on kind of the ultimate final profile.
Hmm. I don't think it's a huge difference, um, but the main thing is that Jefferson's Ocean is very good whiskey. That's the important thing. Whether the ocean makes a big difference, I don't really think so. I think it's more just that they're a little more exposed to the elements than they are in a sheet metal rickhouse like they are back in Kentucky. Um, and in this case, you end up with whiskey that's very good. I felt like I messed that word up somehow, but I
Yeah,
didn't.
because you're
You can
thinking of
see
a
my
whiskey
brain
business.
reset for a second there.
It's a whiskey decisions, whiskey business.
Yeah, it's a whiskey decision when you're buying a $90 bottle of whiskey. Um, but and he says the Metallica thing is a gimmick. Oh, I agree. Like vibration of the barrels adds something. I don't know if it adds something you can notice. Um, but it's still pretty good whiskey, most of it. Anyway, back to my Jefferson's Ocean. The difference between these is kind of surprising. You can see there's a very, very little color difference, if at all. Um, but the flavor difference is what's key. Like the Voyage 24, which, as I said, had higher temperatures apparently on average and peak, um, definitely is a little bit sweeter, a little bit more rich in the kind of buttery kind of notes, um, and it definitely a little bit spicier. Like it's just a little more intense in every way,
Yeah.
um, which I really like. It doesn't have as much salt, and it's not as elegant as the Voyage 23. Um, but I think it's really good, and it's working really well with this cigar. Jared also mentioned that this is his favorite RoMa Craft cigar, which I can
Yeah,
definitely
man.
see. I think his comment was, let me scroll up. It's everything he loves about Dominican tobaccos, and I agree. I think they got the good side of Dominican tobaccos in this, and not the side that I'm not as big a fan of. Which a lot of, like I said, that minerality, like licking a rock, and a lot of Dominican cigars to me kind of overpower with that flavor. Um, just overly earthy too. But this is a really nice middle ground between like the style of a Nicaraguan cigar, but using all Dominican tobaccos.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. I really dig the cigar, and I'm paying for it, I think, a little bit, and that I'm feeling the vertigo stuff a little bit, but it's I
Uh oh,
think it's worth it.
I don't
On a
like that.
scale of on a scale of 1 to vertigo, I'd say this is worth it for sure. So you mentioned doing a vertical tonight. I'm curious where you're taking this now
No,
with the
that
final
the
pairing.
vertical's over. But I
Oh, I
will
thought you were all right.
not. I said it's kind of a vertical.
Kind of a vertical. That's fair. Okay.
It's a partial vertical. I don't have another Jefferson's Ocean to put up against this, so I have something completely different. But first, I want to know how your athletic is working out.
Fantastic. It's so good. It's got that zip from the hops, which is really nice, and it doesn't have that sweetness that I mentioned with the old Milwaukee. We talked about you get that malty. It almost tastes like malt syrup soda with a little hops. It doesn't have that. It has that classic, higher IBU profile that you would expect with a decent malt base.
Nice.
So
That's
more
awesome.
bread notes and less kind of malt sweetness.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds fantastic, especially for
It's
a
athletic,
non-alcoholic
man.
beer.
And the I just very clean. Just looks nice.
Their packaging is great, man. Like,
They did a great job with their packaging. Only 60 calories if you're worried about that, which is, some people do care. So that's always nice.
all right, for my last pairing, I have something I featured last week during a very different vertical, um, partial vertical, I should say. This is Bunnahabhain 12.
Oh boy.
Um, I tasted this last week, and I just thought this might work really well with this cigar. Um, and so I wanted to bring it on again. So Bunnahabhain is an Islay distillery in Scotland, of course, founded in 1881 on the northeast corner of Islay. It's kind of the coast that faces the Isle of Jura across the waterway from there. Um, when it was founded, it was literally the middle of nowhere. They founded it there because there was a spring that was discovered. So they built the distillery on this spring, and over time, they built the village of Bunnahabhain around the distillery. So there's still a village there, but it was started as a village just for workers to live in because they didn't have to travel through the peat bogs and stuff to get to work. Um, for decades, many decades, from 1881 until 1960, the distillery only got supplies by ship because there were no roads that went to the distillery. That's how
Which is
remote this
amazing.
place was. Middle of literally nowhere in Ireland or Scotland, sorry, Islay. Yeah, 1960. That's when they got roads. 1960, man. It's just crazy to me. In 1885, there was it was like the Grand Chancellor of Scotland whiskey distilling business or something like that. So this was the distillery had only been there for 4 years, and he noted that it was the most automated distillery he'd ever seen in Scotland. They had steam-powered elevators that they were using to lift the grain up to the grain floors or the malting lofts. Um, and then they had what's called an Archimedes screw, which I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen it before, but it's kind of it's like one of those that bucket that the guy uses to spread like grass seed or
It's
ant
like an auger
poison.
screw.
Yeah, it's like an auger screw that the grain falls into and it spins so it flings it out. But
Yep.
that's how they distributed it, rather than everybody else who was using shovels and carrying bags of grain. Um,
I mean, spinning around and shooting seed everywhere is
yeah,
definitely a choice decision by many a Scotsman.
exactly. And again, this was 1885, so like they
That's
didn't
pretty cool.
like they had robots doing their work in 1885. It's wild. In 1894, the Bunnahabhain distillery was actually the first building on Islay to get electricity. Um, man, my words are not working tonight. Maybe
That was what? 18? Was it 18 something?
1894,
Wow.
the first
That's cool.
electrified
Okay.
building on Islay. All the other distilleries were already there. They were still using steam and gas. Um, and and man, it's crazy how technologically they advanced they were for a distillery that was
Yeah,
so off
certainly
the
for the
beaten path.
time.
Um, since the 1950s, the distillery has been using a different source of spring water that's nearby, but not right next to it like the old one was because that one couldn't supply them enough. Um, so they are piping it in from a couple miles away. Uh, so they have pipes that send the water to the distillery. Currently, they're the only distillery on Islay that uses only spring water for their production, which
That's
is pretty
cool
cool.
too. Yeah, man.
One of the interesting things about Bunnahabhain being on Islay is that they are, I think, the only distillery that's mainly known for their unpeated whiskeys. Um, Bruichladdich has many unpeated whiskeys, but like their core line includes some peated whiskeys.
Yeah.
And this is one that they they never really peated their whiskey. They have a couple of peated versions. I have one over there that I had last week. I'm sure I'll have it again sometime when I find something to pair it with. But as with most of them, this one is unpeated. This is the 12-year. It's unpeated, aged for 12 years in a mix of sherry, bourbon, and whiskey casks. I assume whiskey casks. They're basically saying like a third fill, where
Probably, yeah.
they held bourbon, then they held scotch, and now they're holding scotch again. Um, they may be using kind of I don't know the word for it, refired whiskey casks. Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
sorry, new manufacture whiskey casks that held Scotch for the first time. Um, but I'm not really sure. This it's bottled at a very strange bottling proof of 46.3% ABV. Um, just that extra point 0.3 on top of what the other guys are doing, I guess.
Well, I think part of it could be marketing. The other part of it is also when you start doing your ratios and your cuts with water, sometimes it just so happens that the profile, right? You do a taste test with your panel of whoever's working on it, and you decide this one tastes the best with just that little bit
Yeah, that
more. It sounds crazy, but at scale, that 3% makes, it does make a big difference.
yeah, just those like I don't know 5 drops of water in this bottle could be the difference between the profile they like and the profile that they don't feel like
Right.
is on brand for them. Um, but I'm gonna take a couple sips of this Bunnahabhain and see how it pairs with this aroma. What do you
Cool,
got up
man.
last?
All right. This is one that I talked to you about when I first tried it, just recently tried it for the first time. It was it was weird. I couldn't put my finger on it. I think I figured it out. Uh, Sam Adams released a non-alcoholic very recently as well. Uh 2021, I want to say just the haze came out. So this is, you'll see, hazy, it's juicy, hazy, and refreshing. And it says on the bottom there, you see malt beverage, natural flavors. So this is the part that threw me off. I didn't see that. And I poured it. This is what it looks like. So it is pretty hazy. Listen, it looks like beer. It smells like beer. It's got that haze quality, but the first thing I noticed was apricot. It just smells like apricot. And if you're into hazy IPAs and those kinds of beers, you you've had, no doubt, you've had beers like that. They were just like, man, it smells like fruit.
Well, an apricot is kind of one of those flavors that can come out from hops. Like in a hazy IPA that's very sweet, naturally
Yep,
sweet, not with no additives. Um, that's just sweet. Like you can get apricot notes out of that.
absolutely. And not just the hops, but also the yeast. I recently brewed with a yeast called Helio Gazer, which was really cool because it smelled like papaya, it smelled
Oh
like
wow.
mango, and it was the weirdest thing. Because normally yeast, when it's doing its thing and it's farting away, it smells like yeast fart, basically. It's not one of those things where you go, oh man, I want to smell that again. It smells so good. And so I think nailing down, thinking about their process and kind of the ways, I suspect what they did with this is they did a syrup base and completely bypassed the entire ferment process based on how sweet this is, and I think they added fruit juice, which is
That would make
the
sense.
natural flavoring. And that's not to say it's bad. I just think that if you if you like hazy IPAs and you go for a non-alcoholic hazy IPA, this one in particular, it's going to be a lot sweeter. It's going to have some just kind of weird funk to it. I don't
I mean,
dislike it, but
I kind of get what you're saying. Like when you call it just the haze, I don't expect that to be with fruit.
right, I would expect more
Yeah, I would
hop
expect that
quality
to be
to it.
all about the flavor of a hazy IPA. But it could be that they didn't quite get the profile they're going for, and they just couldn't
Right.
make it work without adding fruit juice.
Yeah, I should have mentioned Sam Adams, for those of you that don't know, is a brand produced by Boston Beer Company. Boston Beer Company and Jim Koch have been doing this since 1984. And they went from, which is crazy because, for a long time they were considered a small craft brewery.
Yeah.
I think even to this day, Sam Adams, the brand Sam Adams is a small craft brewery, still considered.
My understanding is that Jim Koch is so powerful and so well regarded in the craft beer community that they basically bend the rules
Yeah,
however they
yeah,
need
yeah, yeah.
to make sure that Sam Adams is always technically craft beer. I know
And
that at a couple points that has been like increasing the maximum barrel limit for a craft for the definition craft brewery. Um, yeah, but he's doing it. He's doing the craft American dream where you don't sell your company. That version.
no, but he's playing the monopoly game where he's buying other companies. And now
Hmm.
Boston Beer Company right now owns a bunch of different brands outside of Sam Adams, Twisted Tea, Angry Orchard, Truly, Hard Seltzer. But then others, we recently found out about this, well, a couple of years now, but Dogfish. Dogfish is under the Boston Beer Company brand,
Mhm.
or the umbrella, if you will. Coney Island Brewing, which I loved for a long time living in Brooklyn, and that was my jam, right? And they sold fine. They're still producing, which is great. But they produce in 2019, they produced something like 5.3 million barrels.
That's a lot of beer.
And that's between all the brands. That's not just Sam Adams, that's all the different brands. But still, it's impressive.
And to still be they're still a privately owned company, right?
Boston Beer Company is public.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
they are on the New York Stock Exchange as SAM.
oh, nice.
And I think they've been doing really well. If I'm not mistaken, I think Sam's like pumping it.
Michael King says never been a big Sam Adams fan. Just my personal opinion. I'm there with you. I don't drink a lot of Sam Adams, but I respect that they keep it real for a big beer company.
For the most part, yeah. And I kind of get that same feeling. I've never really been a big Sam Adams fan. Uh Boston Lager, people like Boston Lager. You either like
Not for
Boston
me.
Lager or you don't like it. Um, but sometimes if I'm stuck against my will at gunpoint at an Applebee's and there's nothing else to drink, I'm gonna go for Sam Adams
True.
because I know that's the one tap that they are mandated to clean. If nothing else, they're gonna clean that one.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of sad to go and enjoy beer in public based on what taps are clean or not. But you start to pick up on the nuances, every now and again. Guinness, if it's an Irish bar, their Guinness taps are going to be impeccably clean.
Yeah. Definitely. All right. On to my tasting notes for the Bunnahabhain. Um, I'm finding with this cigar, the sherry really comes out like that stewed cherry kind of jammy sweetness.
Yeah.
That fruit coming from the sherry barrels is really present. Um, there's a little bit of dryness on the palate as well, which is very interesting. I think those having multiple different barrels for this really add to the layers of the flavor, and also the layers on the nose. Like when I nose it, it's almost all sherry, but then when you keep nosing it, like the sherry kind of falls away as your nose gets used to it, and then you start smelling the underlying, um, I don't know, the breadiness, the biscuitiness.
Yeah. I was gonna ask if it has that biscuit quality to it,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm always a big fan of with scotches.
Yeah, and this one for me is working really well with the cigar. That amped up sweetness from the sherry barrels works really well with this blend. How's that just the haze working?
Oh man, I
Nothing but haze.
I want to like it, and I it's making my stomach like all bubbly and right, like the bubble guts. It's the sweetness. I think it's the sweetness and whatever else. It tastes good, and certainly if you don't really want to drink, out of all the options for non-alcoholic, if you want something that's not really abrasive, this is definitely a great start. But if you are a classic beer drinker and you want something with a little bit of that bite and the IBUs, that's I think the only thing. I went into this expecting it to be hoppier in a
Yeah,
lot of ways, and it
expecting
just
it to taste like an IPA. Right?
yeah. For apricot juice, I think it's fantastic. So if you want something in the morning to pep up your step with your eggs and your sausage, and yeah, I think it'll do the job. Cigar wise, I unfortunately I think the sweetness is taking away from the cigar,
Oh man,
and
too
it's
much
it's it's
sweetness,
sitting
huh?
on top of that minerality that I really enjoyed in the beginning.
I could see that because this cigar has a really nice sweetness to it, and if you take away the sweetness, then it's all spice and minerality.
Yeah,
Because the earth is kind of in on the sweetness part for this one.
I will say the retro hail is really nice and leathery, and I love that. It's a
Mm.
just enough of that leather to kind of want some more.
That's one of those
Not so much
flavors
that
that
it
I was
blows out
getting,
your
but I
palate.
couldn't put my finger on.
It's like an old leather book. I think.
Hmm.
And again, it's so subjective. It's whatever memories you have from your past that you go, yeah, man, it reminds me of this one thing
That leather
that I
jacket I used
experienced
to
at some
have, right?
that old stinky leather jacket. You smoked your camels in the rain, drinking whatever it was. Like, yeah, man, the cigarette hole still in it.
All right, I'm going back through my pairings now. I'm ready to call Bunnahabhain my pairing of the night, but I gotta go back.
Yeah, I think I got a solid decision on mine too.
Yeah, for me the Jefferson's Ocean Voyage 23 is just a little bit too dry. Um, especially coming off the back of the Bunnahabhain, something kind of with that hard candy sweetness like the Bunnahabhain has. Um,
That Belgian candy sweetness, yeah.
the 24 really brings back that sweetness. Oh, and it has some more bite than I remember it having. Like almost rye spice.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm still going with the Bunnahabhain. I can't go with anything else.
Yeah, fair, man. I can't blame you. I think I would pick the same. Mine, I think I'm gonna have to go back to the athletic. I really dig it. I
I
think
think the beers they make are just fantastic.
and now I haven't had this before. This is the first can of this that I've had
Nice.
of this particular one. I've had all the other ones. I've had the stout, which was not bad. Um, but yeah, man, this Mexican lager, it's got some of the color. Not wait, is it the right glass? Yeah, it is some of the color, but it's nice. The flavor is there, which is important.
I mean, it's the most important you could say.
And well, even more important is when you're pairing with a cigar, you don't want it to ruin the experience of the cigar, take away from the cigar experience.
Yeah.
So in that sense, again, that's I'm leaning more toward this for that reason as well.
All right.
It's impressive, man. If you haven't tried Athletic, go out there, just buy it. I think they're 4 packs or 6 packs. I forget how they sell them. It's a little
Six
box.
packs, they're about $10.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
if
Just
you
buy it.
order a certain number, I think they give you free shipping on the website, and that's where you can really get the weird stuff on their website. Um, I'm gonna look it up right now just so I can like highlight some of the weird shit they're making right now because they've always got some weirdness going on, some funk.
Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, non-official sponsor of this episode is Fernet Branca because I happen to have a ton of these glasses.
Right now, they're limiteds that they have. Man, some of these sound fantastic. They have Trailblazer, which is a hoppy Helles lager.
Hellas is nice.
They have a Marionberry sour with lactose.
Hmm.
Um, they have a lemon radler, non-alcoholic. That sounds good.
Oh, okay.
An extra dark beer with coffee. A Belgian style white. A chelada. Man, they have
A
a
chelada?
chelada. That's
That's great.
wild.
Oh, they on their website they also sell
Spiced
salt
hot
rim
chocolate
kits.
beer. Um, yeah, they got a bunch of weird stuff. It's awesome. Uh, if you're into weird beer, but you want to try some beer that doesn't have any alcohol in it, they come highly recommended from us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someday, we're gonna have to do an all athletic show.
With somebody from Athletic, no
Yeah,
doubt.
if we can make that happen, I would be very into
Can be. I'm gonna reach out to Mr. Athletic himself and see what we can
it.
cook up.
Mr. Athletic. Uh, nice.
I don't think they would because they're about health and
Yeah, I don't think they would either.
sporting and trailblazing and 2%. By the way, 2% of all profits are donated to restoring trails in America, which is
Oh, that's
cool. 2% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're selling a ton of product, it does make a difference. It adds something, which is nice.
yeah, that's cool. Man, and you could also get mystery samplers.
Yeah.
Just 4 random 6 packs. I like that idea. All right, guys. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the pairing segment. We've finished our pairing. Uh, Any other notes on the cigar, Dennis, other than it's good?
It is. I would say I would like to get some more of these, but my excitement initially, where I thought, man, this is like my new favorite RoMa Craft. It's up there, but I think the might have to sit on that Cro-Mag for a little bit longer.
Good luck with those. Have you tried the
Yeah.
new Chromac? Yeah.
No, I haven't.
So for
That's on my
anybody who
list.
doesn't know, the Cro-Magnon, due to the Connecticut broadleaf wrapper shortage, hasn't been made in a
Yeah.
while. They've gotten very difficult to find. I don't know how many more are being made, if any. Um,
If at all.
I
Yeah,
assume it'll come
maybe
back at
not.
some point, but you never know with the way that Connecticut broadleaf's been going. Um, so Skip has a new version with Pennsylvania broadleaf. I've smoked a couple of them, and at first I was not sold on it. I think I've warmed up to it, just being that I've gotten used to the fact that it's not going to be the same. Um, it's a different cigar, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
and
not
that's
a one
okay.
for one replacement, but I think it's pretty good. I need to try some more of them to really make my mind up. But it's still solid. It's just not quite the original, which was one of my favorite cigars ever. So I'm sad they're pretty much gone. All right, well I guess that brings us to the end of the show. Uh, Check out the Quinquagenario at a cigar shop near you, or track them down if you're interested in trying them, because they won't be available forever. Um, and now it's time for our one for the road segment, which is where we tell you about some piece of media that we've consumed recently, or been consuming, something we've enjoyed, that we want to give a little shout out to. Dennis, what's your one for the road?
I got an old, very excited about this. Got an old horror slasher sci-fi kind of film from 1994. Let me know if you know this movie, if you've seen it, called Brain Scan.
Oh yeah,
Oh, you have?
yeah,
All right. Of course you have, because you're the horror guy,
yeah.
obviously. All right. Well, if you haven't seen Brain Scan, what's his name?
Edward
Furlong.
Furlong.
Edward Furlong from Terminator 2 fame. He was the kid from Terminator 2, which was released in 1991. So a couple of years later was in this movie called Brain Scan, which was this wild, like, basically it's a game disc where you go in there and you commit murder, but the murders happen in real life. I'm dumbing it down in a lot of ways because I don't want to ruin the fun of it, but
It's a
it's
wild
just
movie.
it's a wild movie. It seems awful. If you watch the trailer, it's gonna seem like hot garbage, but stick with it because it's very well shot. I think it's well shot. The the effects are great. The lighting, the sound, the music is perfectly put in to all the different scenes. It feels like a very fun slasher film. And again, for 1994, it was a good time for those kinds of movies.
I love it. I'm gonna have to watch that again this week.
Yeah, man. What do you got for us?
All right, so my one for the road is going to be a show that I haven't finished watching yet, but I've really been enjoying. Um, my wife and I are like hooked on it, and we haven't had enough time this week because I've had a very busy weekend um, to watch more of it. But it's called Shogun. It's on Hulu, and
Oh
I think
yeah.
it's on FX. Um,
Yes.
Holy shit! It's like a period drama that takes place in feudal Japan. Um, and it's kind of about an Englishman who washes up in Japan and has to deal with all of this uh, misunderstanding between the language barrier and the culture barrier, and I just find it really fascinating. It's a really cool look at what Japan was like back then. I find it really entertaining that and really kind of a point in how both cultures viewed each other, that neither side understands each other, but they both call each other barbarians constantly.
Yes.
So like they'll be like, this barbarian won't listen to us, and he's like, these barbarians are beating me, and it's it's just really fascinating look at the clash of cultures. Um, and kind of the hoodwinking of Japan by the Portuguese as a society, where they kind of thought that the Portuguese were pretty much the outside world, and all of Europe was just Portugal, and they kept it like that until this guy shows up, and so he's throwing a big wrench in all sorts of stuff, and it's very interesting. We're only about halfway through, but I cannot wait to watch more.
The
So
human
check it
element
out.
is the commonality is there. It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Man, this is a good cigar. I feel like it's getting better in the tail end. All right, guys. Well, I
Oh
guess that
man.
wraps up the show for this week. We will be back next week. I have a box of stuff that just showed up at Dennis's house, so we will have to figure out what we're gonna smoke out of there. Um, I
No
was
doubt
gonna
something
say
fun.
I was gonna say I could pick something now, but I'll wait until he at least opens the box and has a chance to peruse the contents of our upcoming shows. So we will talk to you on the next one. Everybody have a great and safe week. We'll talk to you next week on Sunday. And Dennis, go ahead and hit him with the catchphrase.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. And remember, we want you to drink better, but we want you to drink less.